Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to the 2022 Engineering for People Design Challenge. I'm glad you could all be here today. Obviously, I can't, and my apologies for that, but I thought I'd give a few words here on behalf of the Centre for Appropriate Technology to acknowledge the great work that all the universities and students that have been involved in the challenge to date have done, and I wish you very, very well in the announcements that are going to be made very soon. Anyway, before we get into that, I think it's very important that I take the opportunity on behalf of our Indigenous board and our Indigenous staff and the founders of our organization to give a little bit of background to the organization, where it comes from, and the role of engineers and technology experts in that, and perhaps a little bit of my story as a non-Indigenous person, obviously not from Australia, and how you too can be part of engineering a better future. A bit of a wordplay, how to appropriate technology, and importantly, the role that you as potential future humanitarian engineers can play in helping to maintain the world's oldest continuous culture. Perhaps a better way to phrase that would be helping the world's oldest continuous culture to maintain its own culture and its own traditional lands. So the Centre for Appropriate Technology, as you're probably all aware, was founded in 1980 by a board of Indigenous people following on a process of return to country that was happening about then, a process of land rights that Indigenous people in Australia had been fighting since colonization to get their lands returned, to get their rights, and to actually live on country and practice culture again. Our organization is entirely Indigenous run with a majority of Indigenous staff, but has a very heavy technology focus. As you're probably aware, our mission and our vision is to help Indigenous communities to appropriate that technology that they need to live on country. And we'll talk a bit about the theory of change there in a moment. But just importantly, on that homelands movement, is a very important moment in history for Indigenous people in Australia. We all know the negative impacts of colonization and the atrocities that occurred, and many more have not been recorded in history, and will come out in the decades and years to come. But many of the Indigenous people, as this is a beautiful statement, they are still fighting for their country and still fighting to get back to that country to live on it. And something that perhaps we may or may not understand as non-Indigenous people, that the cultural importance of actually being on that traditional land is unequivocal. And I won't divulge too much on that now, but it's very much a spiritual and cultural practice to be on country, to maintain traditions and ceremony that has to occur while on country. So importantly, an organization like ours is established to help Indigenous people to live and thrive on that country. Our role, importantly, as engineers, as technology experts from the outside, or as an organization, even as the Centre for Appropriate Technology, is not to actually do the preservation of culture or to somehow intervene in that process. Our process is to focus on the technology that helps people to live on country, safe, reliable infrastructure, water supply, energy, shelter, and then to thrive on country with the sustainable livelihoods, the human dimensions and the economic dimensions of being on country. So I like this: live and thrive on traditional country, understanding that vast numbers of Indigenous people have been getting land rights and getting their land back, but there's very little infrastructure on that traditional country, which helps them live comfortably in a more modern environment that as should be their right. So what does that mean? Appropriate technology. CFAT has spent a long time developing various different gadgets, and we can have a lot of fun as engineers and technology people devising appropriate technologies. We can see here hotspots and compact dwellings made out of shipping containers, solar power systems, water supplies, these are drum ovens, which are made from 44-gallon drums to help people cook in remote communities. When you're cooking half a kangaroo, it doesn't generally fit in your standard kitchen oven. Right down to, we have, hot water systems made from old gas bottles lying around, hand-powered washing machines in the days before we could get solar power out to remote communities, made from 44-gallon drums, hand-powered water pumps, food production systems, wicking beds for desert environments. But our technology goes right up to, in sort of more recent times, to helping to build buildings, infrastructure, those places where people live and work. These are some examples of some ranger bases that we built, which is conservation rangers, places for them to work and live in extremely remote areas. And building in these areas can be very challenging. Right up to renewable energy. If you've been reading a lot about CFAT, you'll understand we had a really successful, very fun, exciting program called Bushlight that was building standalone solar power systems to over 130 locations, extremely remote small homelands around Australia. And we actually maintained over 250 systems in total for a while before government policy change meant that no longer occurred. So, but we mustn't forget that we're talking about appropriating technology. It's not just about the gadgets and the clever inventions. It's about the humanitarian dimensions, the people on the ground. And a lot of what we also do is planning, engagement. What is your vision for country? How are you going to get back to country? How are you going to sustain yourself there? And in that process, we do a lot of participatory planning. Here's what that looks like. Lots of people getting together, having conversations about the future and documenting that with lots of sticky notes and clever processes. We see that as an appropriate technology in itself. And why get people's visions? Why get people's plans for the future out there? Well, there was once a great philosopher who said, if you don't know where you're going, you end up somewhere else. And that's really a great conversation to have with people, hand in hand, about where you're going to go with your future economically, culturally, and environmentally, and how can we support that, and what technology do you need to do that. That great philosopher was somebody called Yogi Bear. Most people here probably wouldn't know who that is, but those that do might have a chuckle. Now, to sort of finish this story, I want to quickly talk about our theory of change. As I've said, wrapping this up, people on country is the goal for Indigenous people. Why is that? Well, we'll go into that in a second, but technology is the tool that helps people to be on country and live comfortably on country. If people are on country, that leads to healthy culture, healthy country, healthy people. Healthy country being Indigenous people can look after that environment, protect those unique ecosystems. That is a very healthy lifestyle, and there's plenty of research to support that. Healthy culture can only exist when it's been practiced, and to be practiced, it has to be on country. Technology at the bottom here is the enabler of that. We keep expanding that. Appropriate technology leads to good infrastructure, sustainable livelihoods, and jobs. Remembering that technology is not just the gadgets, it's the way we engage, it's the human dimensions, it's the social and cultural dimensions of how we engage together cross-culturally in helping to create better futures for people in the country. If we continue, that good infrastructure leads to the ability to live on country, the good sustainable livelihoods, the other appropriate technology helps people to thrive on country. Our processes, tools, the way we engage and interact, not just the technology and hardware itself, the software of that process of helping people to appropriate technology. So what is the role of engineers? Well, I see our organization as a translator of technology, a technology facilitator that sits in the middle here as an Indigenous organization of people that are Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who also know how to talk to the community, who understand the language and cultural dimensions and the complex political landscapes that make up Indigenous community. But on the other side of the scale, we have technology experts, humanitarian engineers who are feeding into our process. And we're sitting there in the community in a process of dialogue and interchange where we're assisting those Indigenous communities to plan and decide and appropriate the technology that they need to make technology decisions about. This is what we need for us to take our culture into the modern era and help to preserve the world's oldest continuous culture, but somehow help it to survive, and thrive in a modern era without it dying out, to turn around that process of colonization and destruction and turn it into one of empowerment and emancipation for Indigenous people. And humanitarian engineers play a critical role in bringing your culture or the wider technology and knowledge from the mainstream world and placing that on the ground in the right place, in the right context for community to thrive. So I hope everybody here can take some inspiration from that little talk today, that you, as you go forward in your careers as engineers, you can look at me. Perhaps I came from a physics background, I'm not an engineer myself, but somehow I landed up in the middle of the desert working with Aboriginal people, and you too could. It's about walking side to side with Indigenous people. Here's this man in the picture here is my Yaba. He's my brother, Errol Wallace. He's a Guganyungwa man, and here next to him is actually an architect working for Oricon Engineering Company, and a project where we help them build a ranger base hand in hand. You too could be that engineer in the future, but must always remember that it's about people. It's the technology, get your skills up, learn the technology, learn your culture, and learn that knowledge, that expert technical knowledge, and then learn how to communicate that, how to sit down with people, because it's these people on country that are the most important thing. If we're going to be there to preserve and protect the world's oldest continuous culture, we all have a role in that, and I think we all have an opportunity to learn ourselves from that experience. So thank you for your dedication to changing the world. Thank you for choosing to be part of the Engineering for People Design Challenge. I wish you luck, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime, maybe in Australia. Thank you very much.